The house stood alone. It was a dark shape against the pale sky. Trees surrounded it like tall, silent guards. I had inherited it from my great-aunt Elara, a woman I barely remembered. She had lived and died within these walls, her life a quiet story told to no one. The air inside was heavy. It smelled of dust and old wood and something else. Something like faded flowers or forgotten perfume. I walked through the empty rooms. My footsteps were loud on the bare floors. The silence that followed each step was louder. It was a waiting kind of silence, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to leave. I received the letter on a Tuesday. It was a simple, formal note from a lawyer I had never met. It informed me of my great-aunt's passing and my inheritance of her country estate. I had no other family to speak of, no ties to any particular place. So I packed a small bag and drove for hours, leaving the noise of the city far behind me. The journey felt like traveling back in time. The roads grew narrower, twisting through overgrown fields and dark woods. When I finally saw the house, it looked exactly as I had imagined it would. It was a lonely, brooding structure that seemed to have grown out of the earth itself, unwelcome and permanent. The house was cold, a deep, bone-chilling cold that had nothing to do with the summer air outside. I tried to open a window, but it was stuck fast, painted shut years ago. Sunlight struggled to get through the grimy panes of glass, casting long, distorted shadows across the rooms. Each piece of furniture was draped in a white sheet, making the chairs and tables look like a gathering of ghosts. I felt like an intruder. I was a stranger in this house that was now mine. It did not want me here. I could feel its resistance in the creak of the floorboards and the stillness of the air. I spent the first day just walking. I moved from room to room, touching nothing, just looking. The house was a maze of hallways and closed doors. There was a library filled with books that no one had opened for decades. Their leather covers were cracked and dry. There was a dining room with a long table set for a dinner party that never happened. Everywhere I went, I felt a sense of profound loneliness. It was not just my own loneliness, but the accumulated loneliness of the house itself. It was a place where time had stopped, and I had foolishly stepped inside. It was on the third day that I found it. I was in the upstairs hallway, running my hand along the faded, patterned wallpaper. The paper was peeling at the edges, revealing the dark plaster underneath. My fingers brushed against something that was not wallpaper. It was a thin, almost invisible line. A seam. I stopped and looked closer. It was the outline of a door, perfectly blended into the wall's pattern. There was no handle, no keyhole, nothing to suggest it was ever meant to be opened. It had been papered over, hidden away, and deliberately forgotten. My heart began to beat faster. Why would someone hide a door? I pressed against it, but it wouldn't move. I ran my fingers along the edges again, searching for a latch or a hidden button. There was nothing. It was sealed shut. A strange curiosity took hold of me, stronger than my unease. I went downstairs to the kitchen and found a small crowbar in a dusty toolbox. Back in the hallway, the house was silent as I worked the tool into the crack. The sound of splintering wood was shocking in the stillness. It felt like I was breaking a promise made long ago. The door finally groaned open with a shudder of protest. A wave of stale, musty air washed over me. It was a smell of absolute disuse, of a space that had been sealed off from the world for a very long time. The room beyond was dark, utterly black. I stood at the threshold, my hand on the splintered frame, hesitating. The silence from within the small room was different from the silence of the rest of the house. It was a deeper, more ancient silence. It felt heavy, like a physical weight pressing against me, daring me to enter. I found a candle and lit it. The small flame flickered, casting dancing shadows as I stepped inside. The room was small, no bigger than a closet. It was completely empty. There were no windows, no furniture, nothing at all. The walls were bare plaster. The floor was made of dark, rough-hewn wood. It was just a space, an empty, forgotten box hidden within the heart of the house. But as I stood there, holding the trembling candle, I felt a change in the atmosphere. The room was not empty. I was not alone. That night, the dreams began. They were not ordinary dreams. They were vivid and unsettling, filled with shadows that moved on their own. I dreamed I was standing in the small hidden room, and the walls were whispering. I could not understand the words, but the feeling was clear. It was a feeling of sadness, of a deep and terrible loss. I would wake up suddenly, my heart pounding in the darkness of my bedroom. The house would be silent, Yet I could have sworn I heard the faint sound of weeping coming from down the hall. During the day, things were no better. The house seemed to have changed since I opened that door. I would see movement out of the corner of my eye. A shadow flitting across a doorway, a flicker of motion in a mirror. When I turned to look, there was never anything there. I started hearing noises. A soft scratching sound from inside the walls. The faint creak of a floorboard in the room above me, even though I was the only one in the house. I told myself it was just the old house settling. It was the wind. It was my imagination. I kept going back to the hidden room. I don't know why, it drew me in. I would stand inside its emptiness and just listen. Sometimes I thought I could feel a cold spot, a patch of air that was colder than the rest of the room. I would close my eyes and try to understand what I was feeling. Was it just fear? Or was there something else here with me? Something invisible and sad. The room felt like a wound in the house, a place of old pain that had never healed. It was making me feel its sorrow. My sense of reality began to blur. Was I really hearing those noises, or was the loneliness of the countryside getting to me? I had not spoken to another person in days. The long, silent hours stretched on, filled only with the strange personality of the house. I found myself talking to it. "What do you want?" I would whisper into the empty air. "Why are you so sad?" The only answer was the sigh of the wind or the groan of the old wood. The house kept its secrets close, and the forgotten room kept the darkest one of all. The line between what was real and what was in my head grew thinner each day. I felt a constant low level of fear. It was like a hum beneath the surface of everything. I started to doubt my own senses. Did that shadow really move, or did my eyes just play a trick on me? Was that a whisper, or just the rustle of leaves outside the window? The house was a master of suggestion, and I was its captive audience. I felt myself changing, becoming as quiet and watchful as the house itself. I was becoming part of its silence. I would sit for hours in a dusty armchair, just staring at the wall where the hidden room was. I did not dare to go inside anymore. The feeling of not being alone was too strong. It was a presence that did not wish me harm, but its sadness was overwhelming. It seeped into me, making my own thoughts heavy and dark. I felt a strange connection to whatever lingered in that room, a shared sense of being lost and forgotten. The fear was still there, but it was now mixed with a strange, unsettling pity. I began to wonder if the house itself was the source of my growing dread, or if it was merely a mirror. Perhaps it was reflecting the fear that I had brought with me. The loneliness I carried inside had found a home here, in these silent rooms and dark hallways. The house was not haunted by a ghost. Maybe it was haunted by me. My own mind was creating the whispers and the shadows, projecting my anxieties onto the empty canvas of the old estate. The thought was somehow more terrifying than any ghost. Now, as twilight falls and the house wraps itself in shades of grey, I am no closer to an answer. I sit and listen to the old building groan and shift around me. Is this house a place of supernatural sorrow, a container for a spirit that cannot rest? Or am I simply a lonely person in a lonely house, slowly losing my grip on reality? The forgotten room remains silent, its door slightly ajar. It holds its secrets, leaving me to wonder if the haunting is in its walls or only in my mind.